Hey there, team. So I thought that I would share some things that I figured out about Mapbox Studio that might be helpful because it's kind of esoteric and, it's organizes information in a way that's very different from the way that ArcGIS does. So let's jump right in here. We're going to customize the basic template first. And what you notice is that we've got all of these different components right here. And those are the top level categories for all of the visual elements that we can depict on our map. And they have some controls over here that you can use to change things on a macro level, but that's going to change them across all of the things that are in a certain category. That's where the layers panel comes into play, and that's where we're going to get started here. We've got an itinerary set up, so we're going to talk about how to organize layers, how to organize data in layers, there you go, how to style the elements that we're showing, and then we'll talk a little about icons. So first thing, going back to components here, let's take away the stuff that is not what we want to be working with. We're going to click to hide. We're going to start with our road network, and that's because that's going to show us how to kind of classify the different types of streets that we have here to create this smooth visual hierarchy that we have. So if we go to layers, we've only got, as you see now, our roads shown, and if we turn these things on and off, we're going to see what they are. But bridges, road simple, tunnel simple. Well, road simple here is what we're going to start with. So right here, we've got a panel that will let us configure different aspects of how this is being visualized. Now, notice that these things are all locked. That's because the component is currently setting their style. Whatever is being applied here is telling this how to look. So we're going to go use this button, override. And all that means is that we're going to say, actually use a different parameter than what the component says that you should be using. So we'll override that. And what we're going to notice is that there are some conditions here that are telling us that there's a class containing different types of objects. So this program, Mapbox Studio, is very object-oriented, and having that kind of a mindset is going to be really helpful for how we're going to interact with the data that we want to show and then style it. So let's start by actually going over here to select data. So we get those two tabs, style and select data, right? And what we notice is that the data is coming from Mapbox streets, but that's kind of grayed out. The source is being set by a component. We have to eject the component to edit it. Okay, well, what's that mean? So right now, all of the road line layers are kind of contained in this component. And if we want to interact with them individually, we're going to need to eject them. That's going to disassociate them with that component. So I'm going to choose eject component right over here. Now you can't undo that, so just make sure that you're ready to. And right from there, we can go in and we can select our data. Now, this panel is really important because it's showing us some stuff that we need to filter and define an extent in order to properly display. So you can see that we've got these different sources for data over here. Right now it's got Mapbox streets, that's fine. Road data is what we're working with. Let's take a look at this filter. Now this is really important because the filter tells us that we can set conditions for the data that we have. And this looks like quite a lot going on here. I agree. So we're going to try to approach this in a slightly different way. We're actually going to go ahead and turn off road simple. And we're going to go up here to add new layer. So now Mapbox says, where do you want to come get this data from? Mapbox streets. Road, cool. Filter hasn't been set yet, neither has the zoom extent. So let's go take a look at the filter. And we're going to start by creating a filter, because here's the thing. If we were to go into Style and set a width for all of these, then right now it's just styling everything the exact same way. We know that these are not the same kind of streets. They don't convey the same kind of traffic. They don't need to be shown at the same zoom levels, but that's kind of what they're looking like, because we are currently just looking at all of this road data and telling it how to be styled. So back to select data, filter, create a filter. Now, if we go to our data fields, we can take a look and see what different things we've got. Well ID, bike lane, hey, hold on, here's class. Okay, so if we start looking at the classes, let's look at the different values that we have. Golf, primary, trunk length, tertiary, like, scanning this. Okay, so it seems like there's some things that are probably, the most important that we might want to start with. And primary indicates that that's probably one of them. Okay, great, we got some primary roads here. Now we've also got these things that have this little link over here, and so we're going to find primary link and turn that on too. Great. So now we're only looking at styling a very specific set of roads. So far, so good. Maybe that doesn't look so great. Let's make some changes to color. And if we use this really light color over here, it's kind of hard to see against the background. We need to get more figure ground than that. What if we wanted to do something like, let's say, put a stroke around this line work right here for the road? That would help it to kind of stand out better. Do we have the ability to do that in Mapbox Studio? The answer is actually no. If we go back to select data, or not easily rather I should say, when you go to select data and go to type right here, there is the option for you to create a filled polygon with an optional stroke border, but you're going to have some issues with that. It's not really what we want. They're just lines. So let's go back to our lines here. Cool. And we're going to go about adding a stroke to these lines in a slightly different way. We're going to get that color, and then we're going to go to our layer, that we've created here, road is what it's called, right at the top. And we're going to duplicate that layer. And we're going to call that, I don't know why this is happening, sorry, road stroke. Well now, if we choose a different color, we see that there's that red color that's now replacing where that pale color kind of was before. We're going to use the hamburger button here to reorder those two layers, and then if we take our stroke layer and get that style panel ready, we can go into our width and we can add a different width. And as we kind of increase our numbers here, we're seeing that it's showing up more and more and more. Well, once we get to the point that we want it to get to, of course we can just go right back and we can play around with this so that we can find a place where we want it to be. You get the idea. That's going to let us find the style work that we want to do something like using these double lines for the major roads. That looks pretty cool. So that brings us down to getting this data saved into our map. That's where this publish button comes in. It's really important to make sure that when you get something the way that you want it, that you hit publish, because that's going to show you that data has been saved to the style that you are creating. Now, as you can see, we've got these 2 layers for roads, and we're doing pretty well. We're going to get some more roads in here just the same way. We've got road primary here, and then why don't we just do road primary stroke. Great. Duplicate this, and then we know that we've got our primary, we know that we've got our secondary. So same thing here, and it's the same color that we're looking for. We can go to select data, we can go up to our filter, change that up to secondary link, and secondary. There we go. So now, do the same thing over here. And this one is going to be called road secondary stroke. Selective data, filter by class. Now, of course, that means that they are duplicated in terms of the style characteristics. Well, hey, let's just revisit how these ones are set. Oops. There you go. Obviously some tweakings in order, but now you can see that we've got these wider lines that are putting all of the traffic through, with the secondary streets that are delivering them to the tertiary streets and the streets, which you can experiment with to your heart's content. Now there's one other thing that's important to note here, which is that, go ahead and publish that, as we start to zoom in and out, we haven't actually configured where those zoom levels should be. So now we see that when we get zoomed further out, oh, that actually isn't really working quite so well, right? Not quite so well at all. So using this style across zoom range is going to allow you to get those different zoom tiles configured correctly. Right over here, Mapbox is showing us where we've got our zoom level. And so we can take these, let's see here, secondary roads, and we can change them down to maybe a different value, just like we can with the stroke, by styling across zoom range at level 8. And now we've got a different look. Obviously, we can do that to the primary as well. We could also say, I actually don't want to see that at this zoom level. And if we want to do that, well, we're going to go to those secondary roads, go over to select data, and then choose that zoom extent button over here. And we're going to say, you know, I actually only want to see that when I get above zoom level 8. And look at that, Mapbox actually shows you whether or not, and actually where it will appear in your current view. So that's pretty handy. Once I've done that, I'll just go ahead and go back to style, publish. As I start to make these changes in zoom level, now it's going to pop the data in and out. And I actually think that I misclassed that one. Set it to 7. Publish. And there you go. Of course, now what I've got is my stroke, my secondary. So I'm going to go to 7 as well. And then as I zoom out, All of those are going to disappear as well. Now, this obviously requires a bit of tweaking to get right, and it's worth for things like line work doing that at as many zoom levels as you think it takes to make it look good. That can be a lot. When I go back to style by zoom range and hit done right here, I've got my 2 zoom levels. Well, I can take those and I can add another stop. And that's going to let me now choose additional values where I am applying different style characteristics, such as in this case color. If I want to change the width at different zoom levels, I got to go into the width right here. It is currently telling me what I've got set, add another stop, and then I can continue to configure all of these things. One last thing, rate of change up here, you can play around with this. There's different options for how it's going to change between stops that are less than or greater than the input, so feel free to play around with that. And we'll talk about some other stuff after I finish this video and save.